And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another disappointed episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers fall at Wisconsin 65-60 in a game where Indiana certainly outplayed expectations, as most people felt like this would be a pretty dominant Wisconsin performance, as most of these games at the Kohl Center have gone, where Indiana hasn't won since 1998. But these Hoosiers wouldn't stop fighting, and they gave themselves a chance to win in the end. They made it a 40-minute game, which is, again, better than what we expected, but not good enough. And we will break that down for you here on this episode of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am Jared Morris, your host for today. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips as we walk you through this entire afternoon from the Kohl Center. And we will start, as we always do, with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And the Hoosier Proud banner moment for me happened actually early in the second half. What was really interesting about this game is how similarly the first halves and the second halves tracked, with Wisconsin, kind of jumping out early in both halves. And actually early in both halves, they had 6-0 runs that were broken up by Josh Newkirk, who once again had another really strong offensive day for Indiana, and really in a lot of ways continued his James Blackman Jr. impression that he started in the Penn State game, as Josh had 22 points. He was 7 of 15 from the field, 4 of 6 from downtown. And while he did have 5 turnovers, was really necessary for Indiana to have a consistent offensive threat, and his constant attacking in the second half really helped for Indiana to set an aggressive tone. And so I thought what he did in the second half, when Wisconsin, they kind of came out and they were the aggressors early in the second half, and Indiana was struggling offensively. And Wisconsin actually got up about 35-29. They may have actually gotten up by 8 at one point. But Josh Newkirk had a nice 5-0 run by himself. He made a 3 to break a 6-0 run by Wisconsin, then had a nice drive to the bucket. That got Indiana back to within 4. And then it really kind of stabilized things there for a while in the second half. And then Indiana and Wisconsin kind of went back and forth. But it was indicative of the kind of day that Josh Newkirk had, where he was really Indiana's most consistent offensive player. Josh Newkirk scored as many points as Robert Johnson and Thomas Bryant had combined. And if you had said that coming into the game, I think a lot of Indiana fans would have thought that Wisconsin probably would blow Indiana out. But Josh Newkirk did a nice job, continued playing well, and his emergence as an offensive threat, especially with the absence of James Blackman Jr., has been a really important development for Indiana over these last 95 minutes of basketball. And if he can continue playing like this, especially if James Blackman Jr. can get back and Indiana can kind of have a 3-headed monster at guard where everybody is an offensive threat, then that will certainly help the Hoosiers down the stretch. And I think the biggest positive that you can take from an effort like today, despite losing, is that Indiana really came to play, defended, as well as we've seen them defend all season long. And that suggests that this team can still have some good moments and possibly pick up some more wins, enough wins that it will need down the stretch with a tough schedule to get themselves into the NCAA tournament. All right, well, today's banner moment brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based brand by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. Connor and the team at Hoosier Proud offer a line of T-shirts and accessories that are unmatched for anyone who wants a unique, stylish way to display their own pride in being a Hoosier. And actually, I just got a new item in the mail. Connor sent it to me this weekend. It's a zip-up hoodie with the Assembly Call logo on it. It looks really, really sharp. I'm not sure if he has it at HoosierProud.com yet, but it'll be up there soon, and I'll be emailing everybody who's on our email list with that item because it looks really, really nice. And if you go to HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY, you will receive 15% off your entire order. That's promo code ASSEMBLY to receive 15% off at HoosierProud.com. All right, well, let's make the extra pass, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. We go over to Andy Bottoms first for his Bottoms line, brought to us by Bracketology.fm.
This was a weird game for me. I came in with pretty low expectations, as I'm sure a lot of people did, and yet I sit here after the game thinking about all the missed opportunities that were there and how they really could have won the game. So it's kind of a mixed bag in some ways. I agree with what you said. The defense, I thought, played really well and was really active at times, overly so, but really aggressive double teaming, and saw multiple times when defensive rotations looked really crisp and everything looks good. And so while it's still not perfect, and there are some issues. I think there are some things to build on that end of the floor, but yeah, you kind of look back and say, hey, you had a chance to steal one here, and couldn't get it done. You make a foul and a made free throw. You turn the ball over 15 times, it turns into 16 points. A trend that we've really seen, not just with the turnovers, but the number of points that those have turned into, in recent weeks was a struggle. Robert Johnson shoots 5 for 15, and they're at a point now with the guys that are healthy. They're not going to be able to beat good teams if he shoots that way. And so, tried to make up for it from an assist standpoint. He had 6, which was more than the rest of the team combined. But, they just need him to, consistently make shots, particularly from the outside. And so it leaves me feeling, kind of like a mixed bag. If going in, you had said IU's going to lose by 5, I would have thought that was a pretty good sign. And yet, maybe it's an even better sign that I'm a sign for the future, at least, that I'm kind of frustrated that they didn't find a way to win this game.
Andy, what if I told you that all Indiana lineups that didn't include McSwain and McRoberts out there together outscored Wisconsin? Just throwing that out there.
I would know that. Yeah, I was trying to look to see how that played out. I guess none of them they didn't play together at all in the second half, so that still held true. Yeah, so they got
it was an 8-0 run in the first half, so Indiana outscored them by 3.
8. And everybody else is there. So yeah, kind of like, I mean, just lots of, you can go back and at the point the game was, there's so many little things that you can nitpick that kind of seemed maybe inconsequential at the time that now are a big difference in a game like this.
Sorry, that was just my little quick rant there. But let's go over to the man.
You're right. You're spot on.
Let's go over to the man who gets paid to rant, and that is Ryan and his rant, brought to us by thebiglead.com. Ryan, take it away.
I have to do it this way because I've been told all week that I have to discuss this, but usually I rail on the refs at the Kohl Center, and so I'm going to hold true to that. The foul disparity was not terribly large this time. It was 22-16. Of course, Indiana had more because it's the Kohl Center. Where the problem came was at the free throw line. Wisconsin shot 31 free throws and Indiana shot 12. And this wasn't a case of Indiana just hanging out on the perimeter. They were driving. They were trying to get inside. So I just felt like of course, Wisconsin got the benefit of calls, and quite frankly, the 23 free throws they made versus the 11 Indiana made. I mean, you could talk about that 8-0 run in the first half, but that's the difference in the game right there. Is Wisconsin just had more opportunities at the line, and also, Wisconsin did, and it just seems to always happen at the Kohl Center that way. I thought Indiana played a good game today. It wasn't enough to win, and this probably makes Purdue, in my opinion, a must-win game. I think they really have to win that game now. But if you look down the box score, the only place that Indiana got outplayed really by Wisconsin was the rebounding battle, and Wisconsin won 33-29, and Wisconsin also had 12 offensive rebounds. So you want to look where Indiana lost the game. It was at the free throw line and on the glass, and you can't do that on the road and expect to win the game. Andy mentioned the points off turnovers. That was big too. But 15-13 in the turnover battle, that's better than Indiana's been doing lately. So, it's a disappointing game, and I think you guys are both right that I think before the game, and we said they're going to keep it close and have a chance to win late. You'll feel good about it. But after watching the game, you kind of feel like, oh man, there were chances to beat Wisconsin at Wisconsin. The positive that I took away from this was the defense. I thought it was so far improved, and this is something where, again, it's sort of like the Maryland game where they lost a close one on the road against a good team. You've got to take the positives and build from it. And they went on a bit of a run after they did that. So, hopefully this is something where they can build into Purdue and maybe get their offensive weapon in James Blackman Jr. back. But there were just so many things today that didn't play out in Indiana's favor, and that led to the loss.
Here, Ryan, quick, let me wrap you up by the waist, toss you out of the way, and steal some airtime back like I'm Ethan Happ here real quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is about Wisconsin and the Kohl Center. It's hard for.
And we lost Ryan. All right, so we'll get him back. Look, I want to make one thing clear here, all right? There are reasons to be positive about this game, even though it's a loss. But it's worth noting that going into a game with expectations as low as we had today is unacceptable. Indiana should never enter a game where, I put up a tweet, a little poll before the game started. What did most Indiana fans think? And most Indiana fans, the majority of people, said Wisconsin would win by 13 plus points. And that's not right. That's not how it should be. Indiana should never enter a game with those kind of expectations. But the line was 14. I mean, that's just where we are with this season. And so given the context, and given kind of what we've seen from this team over the last month or so and what's been expected, that's why you can take positives from this game, especially given the injuries and given just all of the particulars. So I want to make that clear. Yes, I understand all the big picture stuff that, where Indiana is right now in the season isn't acceptable, but we do a post-game show and we're looking at it on a game-by-game basis, and context matters. And so in a one-game situation for Indiana to go on the road, play like they did, and show improvement in key areas, that's the thing. The defense was better. The ability to force turnovers was better. That's why there are positives to take from this game. And no, in the future, we need to get to a point where the standard is the standard and we're not happy about a loss, all of those things. But given the context, I think it's okay to feel good about what happened, because what Indiana needed to happen today was build some confidence, have something that you can take away heading into that game Thursday against Purdue. And I think Indiana did that for the most part. Ryan, do you want to finish your rant real quick?
I was just going to say, it's you got to feel bad for the guys from Indiana, because they show up and they play hard and they play a team that's allowed to do things that other people aren't. And it's not an even playing field. And look, Indiana gets plenty of home cooking in Assembly Hall. I get it. I don't think that should happen. I think that every game should be called consistently, and it's unfair to the players when they go out there and put out a great effort that it's tilted to one side. Either way, even if it's tilted to Indiana, I'd be saying that.
Yep. All righty. So coming up, I want to talk about the day for Tom Crean, because there was some good and some bad, and we'll get into that. First, I do want to take a quick minute and tell you about our other sponsor, SeatGeek. Buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to, and none of those older ticket sites want to change that, but SeatGeek is different. They've come along and created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets. SeatGeek is always the first place I go to look for tickets to a game or concert, because everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. SeatGeek does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do the work, you save the time and money. And best of all, Assembly Call listeners get a $20 rebate off of your first SeatGeek purchase, and here's how that works. Download the SeatGeek app either on your Android device or iPhone. Go to the settings tab and click add a promo code and enter the promo code assembly. SeatGeek will then send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. So again, download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code assembly today. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 65-60 loss to the Wisconsin Badgers today up in Madison. And Andy, I want to talk about the day for Tom Crean, because it was an interesting one with some good and some bad, and also a warning from the officials for him to stay in the coaching box. I was kind of hoping he would just tell the officials to shove it and call it both ways. Not sure if he said that or not, but who knows? But I thought it was interesting before the game. Crean said when he was talking to Fish that the big goal that he had for this game was to bring aggressiveness to the game, bring pressure to the game. And that's not something that we've seen Indiana do effectively. A lot of times Indiana plays fast, but they don't necessarily get the other team doing what they want them to do. And today, defensively, Indiana holds Wisconsin to 1.04 points per possession, forces them into 21.5 turnovers by, doing some different things, doubling some ball handlers, which requires good rotations. And at times, Indiana had that. So I thought Indiana really did bring pressure. And even on the offensive end, despite struggling, especially at the start of the first and second halves, to get into what they wanted to do, Josh Newkirk was able to apply pressure in the half court. And when Indiana was able to get it down to their bigs in a good position, those guys were able to do some nice things too. On the downside for Tom Crean, again, I'll mention it, I thought, some of the decisions with the substituting in the first half really cost Indiana. I just don't think you can play 3 or 4 minutes of a Big Ten game on the road against a really good opponent with Freddie McSwain and Josh McRoberts in the lineup. You're not putting your team in a position to win, because those guys do good things. I mean, Josh McRoberts hustled and forced a turnover today. Freddie McSwain had the huge offensive rebound and 2 free throws late. Those guys should play they just can't play together for all the reasons that we've talked about on this show, because they don't present an offensive threat. So you're playing 3-on-5. And so it's not a coincidence. And so if those guys are going to be out there, they have to get stops, and they gave up 8 points in the 4 or 5 possessions that they were out there. And so I thought in that small, those few minutes, Tom Crean kind of coached his team out of the game. And I said on the halftime report, if Indiana comes back, loses by 5 or 6 points, I'm going to mention this because it really, really hurt you. And so, again, I thought some good from Tom Crean in terms of having his team prepared in a tough environment, but some bad in terms of some decisions that I thought really cost his team a chance to maybe go steal a win today.
Yeah, I thought they did try some different things defensively, and I thought at times they just seemed somewhat chaotic, and I don't know whether it was by design or not, but it seemed to rattle Wisconsin at times, particularly early in the second half. They were aggressively doubling out by half court, doing that in the post. And so I thought that was, a good change up from them, at least to show them a little bit something different, see if you can speed them up and things like that. I thought that part was good. I thought, the aggressiveness from an offensive standpoint, there were a lot of possessions, it felt like, in the first half when the ball didn't get inside the 3-point line. Everybody obviously wants to see Bryant get the ball coming off a huge game. Wisconsin, certainly aware of that. So give them some credit in this as well. But, Bryant touched the ball in the post on the first possession of the game, got double teamed. I think Robert Johnson eventually picked up the ball after Bryant lost it. But, they really got away from that during some stretches, and then they got back to it in the second half at times, and more specifically with Deron Davis. So saw a little bit of that. That wasn't consistent enough. But yeah, I thought the lineup stuff was really interesting at that point. We talked after the last game about how you really just can't put lineups out there that don't have one of Thomas Bryant or Robert Johnson in them. And so that first lineup that played with McRobertson, McSwain, neither Thomas or Robert was in the game, and that lineup gets outscored by 5 points in less than a minute and a half. He brought Johnson back in for Newkirk after that. Then that group gets outscored by 3. And as I tweeted out at halftime that group was -8 and everybody else was +5. That everybody else ended up +3 for the game besides that. And so there's spots to use those guys, but I don't know how you use them together. And I think it may have been in the Wisconsin game the first time around that we saw that. Maybe it was the Nebraska game, I'm not sure, but regardless of that, it just seemed like a strange move to make at that time, given the other personnel constraints that there are for this team. And then McSwain played some clutch minutes, crunch time minutes late after. I mean, he hadn't played. He went out at the 9:43 mark or the 9:03 mark of the first half, and he didn't come back in the game until there's 6 minutes and 18 seconds left. So also kind of a weird time to bring in somebody cold. I think part of that was to help to prevent offensive rebounds for Wisconsin, because
it was also Bryant was in foul trouble, so you needed another post guy. That was the reason.
Yeah, but you had Davis and Morgan already out there at that point. So I don't know that was. They hadn't played 3 forwards much during the game. So I don't know. It seemed like an odd time. I mean, he did have the opportunistic basket, but he also got abused by Nigel Hayes off the dribble. So it was kind of a mixed bag. It just seemed odd that if you don't feel comfortable putting him in for over 20 minutes of game time in a close game, then you bring him in the stretch when it's truly crunch time, 6 minutes left in a tight game. So it seemed kind of weird. I understand the personnel constraints that lead to that, of you only got so many guys healthy at this point. You've got to get some guys rest or attempt to, but certainly seemed odd to say the least.
Yeah, and you may be thinking, well, Robert Johnson, Thomas Bryant didn't play that great today, so why is it so important that every lineup have at least one of those guys out there? Well, it's because of the threat that they present and the attention that they garner from the defense. And I don't know if this will, hold up to the final box scores, but the box scores I'm looking at show Robert, Thomas, and Juwan Morgan as the only Hoosiers with positive plus minuses. And that's kind of the point is, for 37 minutes, Indiana outplayed Wisconsin. It was that one stretch, an 8-0 run that, you look up. And yes, Ryan, I realize you lose it for a lot of different reasons, but sometimes you can really draw a line to a particular time in the game that, just like when Indiana got off to the 13-0 run, Wisconsin got off to the 13-0 run at home, that was always going to be hard for Indiana to overcome. And this to me was similar to that, but it was entirely preventable by something that you can control, which is part of the frustration.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of take your, again, plus minus, all kinds of caveats around using it for one game. Bryant was +6, Morgan +2, Johnson was even in the one that I have, McRoberts -13, and McSwain -10.
Yeah. Let's talk about Deron Davis real quick. And I do want to get back to Robert and Thomas because there's more to break down there. And I want to talk Juwan Morgan because I thought he had some really good minutes today. But let's talk Deron because once again, we had another sequence of this game where Indiana goes down to Deron Davis in the second half, and he pretty much owns a couple of minutes of a game. And we're all tweeting, more Deron Davis, please, more Deron Davis. And that stretch where he had those 2 buckets was huge. And if it weren't for how great Josh Newkirk played and me wanting to mention him off the top of the show, that was going to be my banner moment because every single thing that Deron Davis does is really the best sign for this program for the future because he's the guy to build around, one of the main guys to build around going forward. And, in the second half, Indiana had cut it to 35-33. Wisconsin goes on a quick 4-0 run, and then Indiana decides to dump it down to Double D. And he scores on 2 straight possessions. He's patient. He gets the ball up on the rim. It goes in. He, ended up hitting 2 big clutch free throws again. It was great to see. And yet Indiana kind of went away from it after that. And I think Deron, and look at the numbers here, he only took 2 shots. So those were the only 2 shots he took, had 4 free throws. I would love to see him get more minutes and get more touches. And I understand the limitations with he and Thomas Bryant playing together, but I especially felt on a day like today, he needed to get more touches on the block. Ryan, I know you were impressed with Deron. Your thoughts on maybe why we couldn't get him the ball more?
Well, I think that Wisconsin did a really good job of working defensively to prevent that. I still think that they should have tried to force it in a little bit. But then again, when they did try and force it in, you got they had steals off of it, and you got turnovers. And so I think that. Yeah, this team really needs to work on that, and we've complained about that for a few years now. That they just need to be better at feeding the post, and I think when Davis is in there, he's got to be the centerpiece of what you're doing offensively, because he's so competent down there. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't throw passes away when guys double team. A lot of times, if he's not set perfectly, he'll kick it out and repost. And the fact that he's a freshman and knows to do that and instinctively knows to do that is really impressive. But, of course, he does have his limitations defensively. I think that he doesn't move his feet as quickly as he probably will by after a full year in the strength and conditioning program and things like that. So you'll have to see what he develops into. Certainly watching him play, seeing, the positives out of a guy like Devontae Green and Curtis Jones gives you a lot of hope for the future because those guys are going to be really good. They're not there yet, but they're going to be really good. And so when you see what Davis can do already and you just think about projecting him to the future and what he can do, you get excited. And in a game where it was disappointing to lose, obviously at Wisconsin, who's been a thorn in Indiana's side for years now, it's nice to look at a positive like the way Deron Davis played, and hopefully they do get him some more minutes, especially if Blackman is still out and go to more of a front court heavy lineup. I think you've got to keep him in more and get him some more touches.
Andy?
Well, I did think today would have been, we talked about some of the matchup problems defensively that have been there in some of these other games. I did think today, if ever there was a time that you probably could get away with it, it was today, because they were really using Bryant to play Hayes typically anyway, or Vito Brown. Certainly having Davis try to guard, Hap is a question mark, but you could have gone, really big because Morgan guarded Hap quite a bit and let Davis be the guy to guard Vito Brown. So I did think from a matchup standpoint today, that shouldn't have been the deterrent to playing those guys together. In the same way that, we could easily point out things against Michigan and even Penn State to a certain extent where, I'm not sure how that matchup worked. Clearly IU was comfortable with, backing off of Hayes and letting Bryant try to guard him. So it seemed like there was some opportunity to do that today.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Robert and Thomas because, again, you go into this game, you say those two guys are only going to get you 22 points, which is, less combined than each guy scored against Penn State. And you're not thinking Indiana has much of a chance. They were a combined 10 of 22 from the field. Robert was 5 of 15. Thomas was 5 of 7, but 4 of 5 in the first half. And I thought, despite Wisconsin really trying to take him out of the game in the first half, I thought he did a nice job of finding ways to score. I think he had one post move. He hit a 3. He hit a long 2. Another one was just, sprinting on kind of a secondary fast break and getting a bucket. So he found different ways to get involved. and he never quite seemed to get in the flow in the second half. Only took those 2 shots. The other shot was kind of a wild 3-pointer, if I recall correctly, and not, certainly not the monster on the glass that we saw late in that Penn State game. I did think his defense at times on Nigel Hayes was effective. He was playing hard and dove for that nice loose ball, which was good to see. But I think, again, you lose by 5 with those 2 guys struggling offensively, and I thought Robert, he did have 6 assists, and I thought some of the buckets he made, the timing of them was really important. But also, I thought his decision to shoot, what was the score at that time? He took a quick 3. It was 55-50.
He's calling for the ball. Yeah, he's calling for the ball in the wing. Yep, I know exactly.
Yeah, and Clark Kellogg said he liked it. I'm sorry, I hated that shot. With Indiana down 5, you've got Bryant and Davis on the floor together at that point. You have got to go down low to those guys. I did not like that shot at all. So, we need Robert to be aggressive and look for his shot. There's no question. I thought that was a poor time to do it. And there were just several times today where he was kind of loose with the handle.
Let me jump in on that shot real quick. Here's the problem with it for me is that there was a guy closing out really hard to him. And so it wound up being, not closely contested, but a contested shot. If he ball fakes there, he's got a wide open lane to the hoop. And so Robert just has to be more aware of what's going on around him. And I felt like that was, oh, good, I've got a good look and I'm going to take it no matter what. You've got to have, your head on a swivel and more awareness than that. And there was a free 2 points in front of him and he opted to take the contested 3. That's a problem. And he's got to get better at that.
Yeah. Andy, talk about Robert and then we'll go to Thomas next.
I just thought there were times decision-making wise, some of the shots he actually, I guess I'm trying to make 2 different points. There was another play toward the end of the game. He came off a curl and really had Hayes on his back, but he drove right into Happ and into a block shot that ended in what was essentially a turnover at that point. That was the one where Happ, called timeout, falling out of bounds. But he drove right into him when, you either got to pull up and shoot a floater. There was another time in the first half where he had a floater that he could have taken, and having gotten a shot rejected a little bit before that, then he overpassed and IU didn't score at all. So I thought there were definitely decision-making things, and some of the shots that he made, I felt like were harder than some of the ones that he missed. And as you mentioned, a couple of those really came at key times for IU. So there were definitely big shots there, but I do still think you see him feeling the pressure of the role he has to play in the offense with the guys that are out now. And so while I like the shot in terms of, hey, I want the ball, I want to go, get a shot in that scenario you guys just discussed, there were absolutely probably better options at that point. And he ended up rushing the shot because the guy's closing at him from the angle that he was. So, a mixed bag for him. I think still trying to figure out how to succeed in the role that he's in right now.
And let's talk about Thomas, who, and again, I thought we saw in the first half, there was one play where, he yelled at Robert Johnson, for not throwing in the ball when he had the guy on his back. And so, we are starting to see some more assertiveness from Thomas. But again, I felt like he needed to find a way to get more involved in the second half, and that hurt Indiana that he wasn't able to. Ryan, do you think that's a case of Thomas not being assertive enough, Indiana not doing enough to get him the ball, or is that just the way that Wisconsin was defending?
I think it's a lot of it has to do with the way Wisconsin was defending. You saw him really struggle in the first game against Wisconsin, and you saw him struggle last year against Wisconsin too. I think that they're very good at finding guys who have enough size to play inside out, Happ, Brown, Hayes. I mean, guys who are big enough to body up someone like Thomas, but also be able to move out and guard other people. And I feel like they were crowding him a lot. And I felt like there just wasn't an easy path to getting him the ball a lot. And credit Wisconsin. They're a very good defensive team. They've always been a very good defensive team. I think the only hole in their game this year really is free throw shooting, and they did pretty well today, late. So I just think that it's always a tough game when you're facing their size, and Bryant took his opportunities when he had them, but look, also you've got to make your opportunities when you can, and so you saw that Thomas also they baited him into 4 turnovers, with doubling and overplaying on him and things like that, and we know he's been loose with the ball at times, so credit to them for forcing those. But again, I think that it's a tough matchup against Wisconsin. It always is. And so you have a guy who goes 5 of 7 and was efficient, had 6 rebounds and 2 steals, and sadly it's only 11 points and 6 rebounds, but that's not a horrible game against Wisconsin, especially considering the team only scored 60 points and was contained in that way. So you can't really get too down about his performance. I mean, I thought he'd go for a double-double and was, of course, wrong because I've been wrong on all my predictions this year. But
the problem is Indiana's so limited. He's basically got to play at an all-Big Ten level every night.
And I agree. And I agree. And I think that he can't have this kind of performance against Purdue and expect to win.
Yep. Andy?
I thought, just to build on that a little bit, I thought where they really struggled was when IU would get him the ball on the perimeter and ask him to do something off the dribble against Happ, which I think is asking an awful lot given the way that Happ can move his feet defensively. And so I think that probably led to at least half of the turnovers that I can recall going at it that way. And the other thing, I mean, you just continue to see Happ is while it's probably technically fouling, he does a really good job of rooting guys out with his lower body. He doesn't use his arms. He doesn't use his hands. And even one of the shots that Bryant took, and maybe it was Davis, you could see him still just kind of moving his hips into him, but he's not doing things in such an obvious way where you're going to get foul calls. And so, again, I hate to give too much credit for that, but he does a really good job of that. And I think that's something that IU has kind of struggled with, is they are trying to force guys out on the perimeter, or force guys out of the post when they're trying to get position.
Yeah, and as the guys in our chat are mentioning, life is obviously a lot harder for Robert and for Thomas with OG out, with James Blackman Jr. out, and that is important context to keep in mind. And Robert is being asked, as we've talked about, to kind of play a guard role that he hasn't really played and that he doesn't seem fully comfortable with. And so, we certainly understand that, and try to have some compassion, I guess, for when these guys maybe don't play up to the level that we all expect them to. But we're also just dealing with the reality that those two guys basically have to play like all Big Ten players every night out for Indiana to win, given their limitations from a roster perspective and given how poor the defense usually is. Now, today the defense was better, and so Indiana was able to compensate, and Josh Newkirk was better than he usually is. But on a night-in, night-out basis, Indiana's going to need more from Robert and Thomas, and they certainly are going to need more against Purdue if Indiana is going to win that game. We will talk about that game a little bit as we move forward. I do have a couple points to make about Juwan and Devontae. We'll get to them here in just a second. That's coming up on the assembly call. First, I do want to have a final note for you about our fundraising drive, which we started last week, went for about 8 days. Our goal was to raise $2,613 to help carry us through the rest of this season and the off season. And we actually did that within the first 24 hours, and we ended up at just a smidge over $4,000 raised. And so I just want to take this final opportunity to say thank you. We really appreciate the support of all of you. It helps us out so much to be able to bring you the coverage of IU basketball that we do, to expand it like we have this season. So thank you. Really, we really, really appreciate it. So we won't be talking about it anymore on these shows. We do keep a donate page up. So if you would like to donate or support the show at any time, all we ask anytime is just to contribute what you believe our content is worth. You can submit a one-time donation or set up a recurring donation to become an ongoing sponsor, and to view all of the options that are available. Go to assemblycall.com/donate. Again, those options at assemblycall.com/donate. And thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. All righty. You are... Oh.
Hey, one quick thing, just to make this day just a little bit worse for everybody. I'm watching the Iowa-Nebraska game on the Big Ten Network, and they cut to Big Ten tournament coverage, and they showed the replay of the Luke Recker shot to beat IU in the Big Ten tournament. So happy Sunday, everybody. Everything is terrible.
Yeah, why don't you...
they neglected to show the clock not run for like a brief period of time, apparently operated by the same people who were operating the clock at the Kohl Center in the first half.
Why don't they just give us a paper cut, pour some lemon juice on it, throw some salt in there, see what happens?
The day is young, Ryan. The day is young.
Yes, it is. All righty. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We are breaking down Indiana's less disappointing than expected 65-60 loss to the Wisconsin Badgers. Andy, let's talk real quick about Juwan Morgan, who, he still doesn't look right. He still kind of looks like an old man getting up and down the court. You saw him fall down once and he's grabbing his foot, which scared the crap out of me, but he seemed okay because he stayed in there. only 3 points. He hasn't been an offensive threat really since that Rutgers game when he was superb offensively. Did get a couple of rebounds. I thought his defense on Hap at times was really effective in at least making Hap work at times, even not letting him get the ball. Now, Hap still scored 20 points on 8 of 10 shooting, so it's not like Indiana stopped him. But I thought defensively, Juwan showed some really good things, and his ability to rotate and be a guy who could double and then move back and get to a man was impressive because he's not moving very well. He still looks about a quarter step slow, but I thought he played good defensively because of awareness, because of positioning, and just flat out grit. And I thought in some ways Indiana kind of took their cues from Juwan defensively. And so not a game that jumps out at you on the stat sheet, but I thought he was a real leader for Indiana today in terms of what they wanted to do defensively.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were kind of talking through that, I thought his play was kind of emblematic of what IU did defensively today. They really made a lot of effort. There was certainly a stretch in the late first half where IU was really out scrapping Wisconsin for loose balls, and I think he was leading the charge in that way. And as you said, I thought he did a really good job on Hap at times. Again, feels weird to laud somebody for great defense on a guy that scored 20 points, but I did think he did a nice job of being able to kind of root him out a little bit. And while he wasn't able to challenge the shots from a height perspective, I thought he did a lot of his work based on positioning there against him. And so I thought it was a good game from him. I don't think the stat sheet quite showed. When I looked at it now, I felt like at multiple times I'm like, he's playing really well, and it's one of those where you look at the stat sheet, it doesn't necessarily back that up in terms of raw numbers. But I thought he really gave great effort, and he's fighting through a lot. And I thought that kind of picked everybody else because this team fought back in a similar way when they got down 12 in the first half.
Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Juwan's effort was there today, and he looked more like Juwan Morgan than we've seen in the last couple of weeks coming off of that foot injury. But one thing I will say is he's got to find an offensive rhythm. I mean, he's got to be a threat on the floor offensively like he has been in the past. I mean, he's got to be a guy who can get you 10 points. I mean, roughly around there.
He's not making his jumpers this year.
Especially with OG gone. I mean, which means he's got to work inside more, which means he's got to get to the hoop. And he's not shooting 3-pointers. He looks very uncomfortable when he shoots 3-pointers right now. And that may be a residual foot injury thing, just not getting the lift on it and not being settled on his feet when he's shooting.
Get him with Tim Buckley. Buckley.
I'm sure they're working with him, but it's sometimes it takes a stretch. I mean, look at Newkirk; he's night and day from 6 weeks ago with his shot. So, but I will say that Juwan needs to find his way into the paint more, and if he's not going to be able to hit a jumper, he grabbed 2 offensive rebounds today. He needs to grab rebounds. He needs to be in the mix, and he needs to put shots back, or at least get to the free throw line and make his shots. So, he's got to be able to add something more offensively. But I thought this was a step in the right direction. As I said, this game, it's disappointing to lose. Always, you fall below 500 in conference, but you've got to find things to build on. And for Morgan, I thought the effort was right. We praised Newkirk's effort for 2 games, and all of a sudden he's had 2 games in a row right after that where he's the primary a primary option offensively. So hopefully Juwan can sort of get back into a rhythm on that end of the floor.
Let's talk about the freshman guards. Devontae Green had a double-double in the Penn State game, and then curiously, I thought, did not start today. Curtis Jones was the surprise starter for Indiana, which on the bright side hopefully suggests that his ankle injury is better, and I think his ability to go out and get 5 rebounds, and kind of be scrapping in there a little bit suggests that it is. He was 1 for 5. I thought the 3 that he made was a really important one at the time. Because Indiana was down 22-15. That's after Wisconsin had built their lead in the first half, and Indiana was coming back. And so the 3 by Curtis Jones made it 22-18. He was part of that group that led that comeback in the first half. So he did some okay things when he was in there. Still just, again, a little bit surprised that Devontae Green did not play more, only played 13 minutes, especially in a game where Tom Crean wanted to pressure the ball more because he's one of Indiana's better pressure defenders. But I thought, there was one play in particular that I loved from Devontae. And that was in the first half. He and Thomas Bryant were working together over on the left side. And we've seen a lot from Indiana's guards. If they can't make a quick post-entry pass, they lose patience with the process. We'll try and reverse it real quickly or just kind of give up. And a lot of times, Indiana's big men know that's going to happen and don't necessarily repost or continue working to do it. Thomas in particular, Deron Davis will a little bit more. But I thought on that particular possession, Devontae and Thomas really worked angles well together to get Thomas the ball. Devontae moved, was patient, didn't give up on it. Thomas Bryant, did the same thing, and that was really nice to see. And so I think one of the things Devontae Green is showing over the course of this season is he's already one of the best passers on Indiana. And I'm not just talking about kind of the fancy ones on breaks or any of that, but even just as a post feeder, he's better than you see a lot of freshman guards be. So, not sure if there were other reasons. Maybe there's something I'm missing for why he didn't play more, but I thought he did a couple of nice things when he was in there. And I mean, look, that's another thing for Indiana to win these games without Blackman. You got to get something from your freshman guards. And, today, in terms of what Indiana got from the two of them, was 3 points, 3 assists, 7 boards, 1 of 6 shooting. You get a couple more buckets from those guys, and maybe this game is different. And yes, that's a tough ask at Wisconsin, but all those things kind of had to go in Indiana's favor to get the win today. And that they didn't is part of the reason why Indiana lost by 5. Ryan, did you see anything from those guys today that jumped out at you?
I thought it was an uneven performance. Devontae, to his credit, he may have just been exhausted. After that Penn State game, that's going to take you at that age. It's going to take you a while to recover from playing that much.
Newkirk was okay.
Yeah, he was, but he's also older and he's kind of a grown man. Let's remember. But you got to go easy on the freshmen. I mean, it was an uneven performance. I didn't think they played that great, but at the same time, between them, they only turned the ball over once. The freshman guards, they handled the ball a lot. When they were out on the floor. I thought Curtis Jones showed some good stuff. I thought he rebounded really well. And I thought he played pretty solid defense. His shots, he's still got to work on his shot. I think he has too weak a base when he takes his jump on his 3-pointer. So again, Tim Buckley, get to work, buddy. What are we paying you for? But no, look, it was an up and down day. And you're going to have those this in Big Ten season with those freshmen. So I think that it was to be expected. Tough environment on the road, and those guys playing. It was as expected, and it was a game where guys like Newkirk and Johnson need to step up and make up for those guys. So hopefully they come out on fire against Purdue, and we'll be singing a different tune after that game.
Yeah, only thing I had, Curtis Jones, I think the numbers, at least from the number of shots and the threes, don't look great, but I think 3 of his came at the end of shot clocks where he was literally appeared to be the only guy on the court aware that the shot clock was about to run out. So it looks a little bit better or a little bit worse than it probably really was for him. I thought he was really aggressive rebounding in the first half and did a nice job there. But they've just, at this point, the margin of error is so thin with the personnel that's there that you just can't have as many guys not really contribute offensively as you had tonight.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up on the assembly call, we're going to do a quick look ahead to IU Purdue coming up this week, and then we will deliver our final thoughts during last call, which is brought to you as always by our friends at Yogi's Bar and Grill in Bloomington. As we've been telling you about, Yogi's is offering a food discount to assembly call listeners during IU games, both home and road. Just head to Yogi's during any IU game and tell them the guys from the assembly call sent you, and you will get 10% off your food. Our very own Michael Dugan actually did this for Indiana's last game. Said it worked out well. Now, the only caveat is it has to be during the game.
Hey,
any game
Dugan,
will work.
Get to work, Dugan. Why are you eating at Yogi's during games? Get to work, man.
And then stick around after, have a drink, and catch the assembly call live right there at the bar because they play the assembly call live right there at Yogi's. Again, that's 10% off your food at Yogi's during IU games. Just tell them the assembly call sent you. All righty. Well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are wrapping up here on a Sunday afternoon edition as Indiana falls 65-60 to the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Andy, let's do a quick look ahead to the Purdue Boilermakers. I know for me, heading into today's game, I just wanted to see something positive Indiana can build on heading into that game. I think we saw some of that. But as Ryan said, this game really does become close to a must-win because Indiana needs another good win for its resume. It's a home game. You don't want to drop to 5-7, especially with what you have coming down the stretch with 4 out of the last 5 being on the road. So this is one Indiana really needs to get, but it will be far from easy because this Purdue team is playing pretty darn well. So what awaits the Hoosiers on Thursday?
Yeah, they're coming off a big win at Maryland yesterday, a game they got down and really fought back to steal one on the road. So you look at the numbers from an offensive standpoint, they're currently second in league play in offensive efficiency, not necessarily something I think a lot of people would associate with Purdue. They're doing that by taking almost 40% of their shots in three-point range and hitting almost 44% of their threes. So they do a good job there, do a good job of making free throws when they get to the line. So, those are really the big things to watch for IU. Can they, force them into an off shooting night? What can they really do to be disruptive offensively? On the other end of the floor, Purdue is last in the Big Ten in forcing turnovers, so hopefully that bodes well for IU. But they're also first on the defensive glass. So, if IU wants to try to get second chance points, that have been a big part of things, although I'd say a little bit less so since OG went down, will certainly be a challenge to be able to do that. And then, just from strictly from a personnel standpoint, how does IU match up with Haas and Swanigan? Who really draws the assignment with trying to slow down Swanigan, keep him off the glass, becomes a pretty big question mark. And Purdue's got 5 guys averaging in double figures coming into the game, so not necessarily one guy that you've got to stop. They've got a lot of guys playing well. Outside of the bigger names, it's really Carson Edwards, the freshman guard there. Can IU stop dribble penetration from him? He's been pretty tough and actually made the free throws, ended up winning the game yesterday. So Purdue not afraid to give him the ball in a big spot, and IU really has to find a way to slow him down.
I just got a tweet from someone named Dylan. It says, did anyone else see Hap grab and pull Davis when he got that critical steal and breakaway? Dylan's Twitter avatar is a picture of Willy Wonka. My only response to that is that yes, but with the pure imagination that the Cole Center officials have, it wasn't called a foul.
Oh, come
on. Not a surprise.
You could have done something.
Dude, anytime you can pay homage to the great Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka, I'm going to do it.
99% of the time, I'll jump on with you with a Gene Wilder reference, but that one, all right, fine. It was well executed. It was well executed.
Thank you.
But yes, there was a lot of grab and pull there, and there was a lot of that going on pretty much all day. But we move on to Purdue.
That's right. We do move on, and we move on now to last call. Some final thoughts on today's IU game. Ryan, lead us off. Yogi's last call.
Yeah, again, it's a game you can find positives in and build from. It feels a lot to me like that Maryland loss where, yeah, they had their opportunities to win the game, but it was on the road against a really good team, and they were battled and they were in the game and they fought. And if you can take the positives from this game and implement them into the next game and clean up the bad, that's the kind of thing that can get you to get on a bit of a run. And as we said, these last 8 games, including today, there are no breaks for Indiana, and they need a run. They desperately need a run. I mean, if you want to get into that NCAA tournament, you're going to have to step up and win some games. And we know this team is shorthanded. You feel bad for these kids. They're shorthanded. They don't have guys they were planning on having. But at some point, that's got to stop being an excuse. And it's got to be because they're not coming back. OG Anunoby and Colin Hartman aren't coming back. And hopefully you get James Blackwood Jr. back soon. But right now, this is your team. And it reminds me of the Hoosiers thing. My team is on the floor. I mean, these are the guys you got. And these are the guys you're going to have to go to war with, and these are the guys you're going to have to battle with. And there's no excuses anymore. And that goes to Coach Crean. That goes to the players, everybody. This is your team. And you need to utilize everything at your disposal to win games if you want to be in that NCAA tournament, if you want to be a factor. And this team certainly has the talent to make an impact on that tournament. They just have to figure out a way to get there and a way to round into shape.
Yep. Andy, last call.
As we've been kind of talking about trying to take it one game at a time and figure out how they turn this around. I mean, the next game is always the biggest one. And I think that's certainly holds true here with Purdue coming to town. I think you'll see certainly Assembly Hall be a factor. At least I hope so. I think IU is going to need whatever they can get at this point, regardless of who is available, not available from a personnel standpoint. Purdue has been really tough, really throughout the Big Ten, lost some games that are a little bit surprising in terms of losing at Iowa, losing at Nebraska, but they've certainly gotten up for the big games, went into East Lansing and played well, won at Maryland. So, IU needs to show them a different level of environment. And as you look at IU's schedule, these next 2 games are at home, and then 4 of the last 5 are on the road. So you got to make some hay here, and that starts on Thursday against Purdue. And so hopefully IU can build on what the things that they did well in this game. And I think that's what I'll try to take forward of not necessarily the disappointment of not being able to get over the hump, but, the fact that they made progress, they made strides. There's still some defensive pride left to be had on the team. And I think we need to see a whole lot more of that against a really tough team on Thursday at Assembly Hall. And hopefully, a little bit, maybe an extra day in between games gives them a little bit of extra time to rest. Because certainly, I think you saw Penn State come out pretty flat yesterday after having played so many minutes the other night. Fatigue certainly setting in with a shortened bench and a limited number of healthy players. So hopefully, I can get a little rest and be ready to go on Thursday in a big one.
Yeah, and to Indiana's credit, the Hoosiers didn't come out flat. They battled, they played hard, and they came up short. And again, that's very disappointing. And as I mentioned at the beginning, in the grand scheme of things, going up into Wisconsin and really feeling like you barely have a chance, being kind of unable even to make a logical or rational case for why Indiana is going to win the game, that's unacceptable. And Indiana basketball shouldn't be in that position, unless you have maybe 4 or 5 guys get hurt. And Indiana hasn't had that. There's still the talent on this team to go out and play like Indiana did today. I mean, there's absolutely no shame in losing by 5 to Wisconsin. It's the expectations heading into the game that I think have everybody disappointed. But I think you can take lots of positives because of the context. And again, when you're inside of a season looking at individual games, that's what you have to do. We can spend the offseason talking about, is the overall trajectory of the program a good one? But right now, we're inside the season. And I think what we saw against Wisconsin, to me, bodes well for what we may see Thursday against Purdue. Now, we got to go out there and we got to play, and they are certainly good enough to come into Simon Scott Assembly Hall and beat us if we're not on top of our game. But I think we saw some signs today that this Indiana team is not done playing this season and may have a last gasp here as we go down the stretch. And Ryan, as you mentioned, the talent is there for this team to do something. And so, I hope that the crowd is loud and proud on Thursday night, and that we give Purdue the kind of environment that Simon Scott Assembly Hall is famous for, because that can be the difference in a game like that. And that can help buoy this team to another great performance and a big win. It's a home win, but it would still be a resume boosting win for Indiana. And it gets you to 6-6 and gives you a chance heading down the stretch, to finish at 500 or maybe get to 10 wins still in Big Ten play. And that's what Indiana needs to do as it finishes out its season. So a good effort from Indiana today. Some things to build on, certainly some disappointments. But overall, I think there's plenty to feel good about if you choose to feel good about it. And now we'll see what Indiana does on Thursday night against the Boilermakers. That game, I believe, is a 6 o'clock tip or 7 o'clock Eastern tip on ESPN2 against the Boilermakers. Let's be their fans. Let's be loud. Let's be proud. And let's do what we can to help these Hoosiers get a win, because it'll certainly be a big one. And hopefully the Hoosiers bring it too, and we can send the Boilermakers home unhappy yet again. All righty. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We will join you on Thursday night after IU Purdue. And enjoy whatever you end up doing tonight. Are there any sports on TV?
I can't think of anything.
Oh, okay. Maybe watch film of this game again then. All right. We'll talk to you after IU Purdue. See you, everybody.